everyone, it's Elena and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to talk about the Jogee case, which is a case which illustrates how you can be convicted of murder even if you don't actually kill someone. Now before we get into it, I just quickly want to say, yes, I do know that I have a little dot on my nose. It's because I fell and I don't really know how to cover up wounds with makeup, so this is the result of it. But trust me, it looks a lot worse without makeup, so this is the best I could do. But despite this dot, let's get into the case. So although we often say the Jogee case, the Jogee case actually concerns two distinct cases, but they had a very similar fact pattern, and both the defendants tried to challenge their convictions on the same argument, and that is why they were then put together, and the judgment is on both of them. In both cases, the fact pattern was as follows. Defendant 1 killed the victim with a knife. And defendant 2 isn't the person who, killed this person, but they were also charged with murder together with the person who actually killed the person. So they were co-defendants in this murder trial. And the prosecution alleged that this person who hadn't actually physically killed someone had been in a criminal joint enterprise with the actual killer, making it then possible to convict the person who hadn't physically killed someone of murder under secondary liability or accessory liability. Now the rules for accessory liability or secondary liability, whatever you want to call it, were laid down in previous cases, the main case here being the Wing-Siu case, and I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing this right, but this was basically the case where this rule was declared, and then it was developed in a few other cases afterwards. And based on this case, the judges in both cases then gave the jury's directions. So if these requirements as laid down in the previous case are fulfilled, these defendants, which hadn't physically killed somebody but had been in this criminal joint enterprise, would then be convicted of murder. And the juries found these people guilty of murder, they were convicted, and then these defendants tried to appeal, but the court was like, no, actually that doesn't work because we don't really see the error here. So then they tried a different way and said, well, we want to challenge the directions that were given to the juries because these directions were based on precedent. And they argued that these directions were wrong because there was an error in the precedent. And so the court then said, okay, we can review the case on that argument. And so they then reviewed the precedent in order to decide whether they should overrule it because there had been an error made in that precedent. And spoiler alert, yes, they did overrule it, and that is why the Jogee case is so important. And in this video, we're first going to look at what the old law was, and then why the courts decided to change it, and then what they actually changed it to. So yeah, let's get into the old law. So as I said, the old law was mainly based on the Wing-Siu case, which was a Privy Council case. And the rule that was laid down in that case became known as parasitic accessory liability. And I think that already tells you that it was pretty strict. So I'm going to give you guys a rule, and I'm quoting this rule from the Jogee judgment because the court summarized the old rule in order to, make it clearer what they are deciding upon. So here is what the rule used to be for accessory liability. If two people set out to commit an offense, crime A, and in the course of that joint enterprise, one of them, defendant 1, commits another offense, crime B, the second person, defendant 2, is guilty as an accessory to crime B if he had foreseen the possibility that D1 might act as he did. So this is a pretty strict rule on secondary liability because it basically says if you foresee that your partner commits this other crime, even if you hadn't, specifically agreed upon it, then you are guilty of that same crime. So if you foresee the chance that, in this robbery that you are planning to commit with your partner may use this gun he has on him, on a security guard and kill him, then you could be guilty of murder if he did that, even if you never specifically talked about it and regardless of whether you wanted that to happen or not. Your foresight of it was enough. As I already gave away, yes, the court did overrule this principle and they laid down a different principle. And now we're going to look at a few reasons that the court gave for this decision. One reason that they gave is that the Wing-Siu case was not based on a very full analysis, and they said that now they have a much fuller analysis of the case law, which also includes a lot more English cases. So they think that the Wing-Siu case just hadn't, the appropriate depth of analysis and the appropriate breadth of case law. but that they have it now in their analysis. So that was one reason for not following this precedent. Another reason they gave was that this principle wasn't well established, nor was it working in a satisfactory way, and I think the fact that it was known as parasitic accessory liability probably tells you that it wasn't very popular and it just wasn't satisfactory. So that was another reason for saying goodbye to this principle. They also made the argument that secondary liability is a really important part of the common law, because after all, this is the part where you can be guilty of a crime you didn't actually commit. So it is a quite important area of law. So if there is an error in that area of law, it needs to be corrected. And that's why they said, well, if we really find that there's something wrong about this precedent, we have to correct it, because this is such an important area. And I mean, getting convicted for something you didn't do is kind of a big deal. So they also made the point that the approach in the Wing-Siu case is not very consistent with the traditional approach to intent and foresight in the common law, because traditionally in the common law, foresight is merely strong evidence of intent, but it isn't equated with intent. But Wing-Siu, the rule really says you foresee something, it's like you intended it. And that, they argue, makes the Wing-Siu case inconsistent with the traditional approach within the common law, and that is another reason for getting rid of this rule. Another reason that they gave, and this is, in my opinion at least, the most important reason, is that under the old law, the mental threshold for becoming guilty of this crime was lower for the person who would be charged for it under secondary liability than for the principal offender. And that's really unfair if you think about it. So the principal offender, so the person who actually kills, needs to intend to kill or intend to inflict grievous bodily harm. But the other person, who is only liable for secondary liability for this murder, they only need to foresee that the principal offender is gonna kill someone. And that's it. And that's really unfair if you think about it, because the principal offender, the one who actually commits the crime, he has a much higher mental threshold to pass. He needs to intend to do grievous bodily harm or to kill. Whereas the person who doesn't actually kill someone, their mental threshold is only foresee this possibility that the principal offender kills. And that's it. And that is really unfair, because they aren't the ones who are even committing the crime themselves. Yes, they may be involved in it through a criminal joint enterprise, but they are not the ones actually carrying out the offense. So it's really unfair that they have a lower mental threshold to pass than the ones who actually decide to kill somebody. So those are a few of the reasons why the court decided that this rule could not stand. And now we're going to look into the principle that Jogee laid down. I think it can easily be summarized in this quotation from the Jogee judgment. The error was to equate foresight with intent to assist. As a matter of law, the correct approach is to treat it as evidence of intent. So now foresight is no longer equaling intent. It can still be evidence of that intent, but you do need an actual intent to assist or encourage the principal offender. So what exactly do you now need to fulfill to be liable under secondary liability? So as with a lot of offenses, there is a conduct and a mental element, so an actus reus and a mens rea. So the actus reus for secondary liability is now encouraging or assisting the principal offender in the commission of the principal offense. So for example, if the principal offender is the one who actually killed somebody and you encourage or assist him in the process of killing. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether you are successful in that encouraging or assisting, even if your actions have no positive effect on the principal offender's actions. This is enough. The conduct element would be fulfilled, okay? You don't need to be successful. If you just suck at encouraging people, that doesn't matter. Because you could still be guilty if the principal offender then goes off and kills somebody. And the mens rea is now basically an intent to encourage or assist the commission of the principal offense by the principal. Now we can break this mens rea requirement down even further, and I think Ormerod and Laird have a really good analysis of this mens rea requirement in their case note, and I have the full citation of it in the info box below, but I'm just quickly going to give you guys the different criteria that they laid down for fulfilling the mens rea that was laid down in Jogee. So when I'm referring to the defendant now, then I mean the person who is charged under secondary liability, okay? Not the principal offender who actually commits this offense. So first, the defendant intended to assist or encourage the principal. then secondly, the defendant intended that the principal would have the mens rea required for the offense. So if, for example, we're talking about murder, the defendant would have intended that the principal offender would kill the victim with an intent to do grievous bodily harm or to kill this person. And now the defendant needs to actually intend this. So it's not enough that the defendant just foresees that the principal offender may do this. The defendant must have knowledge of any other existing facts necessary for the principal's conduct or intended conduct to be criminal. So for example, do you know that this person is carrying a gun? Where the principal offense requires proof that he acted with intent, the defendant must intend to assist or encourage the principal to act with that intent. So they must want the principal to, commit this offense with the necessary intent so that it actually then is this offense that we're talking about. So yeah, that is the mens rea, hopefully summarized in a not too confusing way. If you guys want a written version of this, I wrote a little summary of it on my website and it's linked in the info box below. Now there's one more thing we need to talk about here, and that is conditional intent. Because as I already said, now the defendant needs to intend that the principal offender commits this offense with the necessary mens rea and not just foresee it. But what if the intent of the defendant is only conditional? So conditional intent can easily be explained with an example. So say you and your partner team up to commit a robbery. And you know that your partner has a gun on him which is loaded. And you really don't want him to use it on anybody. But you are aware that maybe you're going to meet a security guard. You're really hoping that the way you're going to commit this robbery is going to be without walking into a security guard. But you are aware that this risk exists. And although you really don't want this guy to use his gun, if it becomes necessary to shoot the security guard, then yes, you would be okay with it. And you would intend that he commits this offense because you would want the security guard to be shot in that scenario where it becomes necessary for the commission of your offense. So if that is your conditional intent and it's based on necessity, then yes, you are liable under secondary liability. And if the principal used the gun and killed the victim, you could also be guilty of murder under secondary liability. Now this necessity requirement could be a potential out for some people, because you could argue, well, I intended for him to commit this offense if it's necessary, but it wasn't necessary. He just chose to do it. I didn't intend for him to do it under these circumstances. I would have intended it under different circumstances where it was necessary, but this was just out of his choice. So Ormerod and Laird argued that the Court of Appeal may remove this as necessary requirement, but we're really unclear on how this is going to be used. But for now, if you have a conditional intent where it says as necessary, then yes, you can definitely get them under secondary liability under Jogee. So yeah, that's the rule that was laid down in Jogee, and really the key takeaway here should be that foresight no longer equals intent under secondary liability. But don't forget, foresight can be strong evidence of intent, so while it may not equal intent, it can be pretty hard to convince a jury that you didn't intend someone to do something if you knew they were probably gonna do it, because how else do you justify still going through with all of this behavior if you knew that your partner was probably going to pull out his gun and kill someone? So you're going to have a pretty hard time convincing the jury that even though you clearly foresaw something, you really didn't intend it. But still, they can't just use your foresight and say, okay, you foresaw it, it's intent. They do need to make a further step in the analysis and really show that you actually intended this and not just foresaw it and maybe really didn't want it to happen. So yeah, that is the Jogee case. I hope you guys found this video helpful, and if there's another legal topic that you guys would like to have a video on, you can let me know in the comments below or through the contact section of my website, which is linked in the info box below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a nice day. Bye!